All right, well, welcome, guys. So glad that I get to make the first post for our Toxic Charity group. Again, really thank you for wanting to be a part of this, wanting to do the readings, and wanting to grow personally and hopefully as a community of leaders who really care about New Song's work in the community. Before I get into anything, I really just want to give you my heart for this group. I know I've kind of communicated that in some ways, but I really want to make it clear that I am not coming from a place of overly critical or negativity. I think that's lame. I think a lot of, in academia, especially short-term missions, various compassion efforts can really be frowned upon because, you know, it's just easy to be critical. It's easy to see the loopholes or the downsides to things. So I really want to say, I know we're reading some difficult material. Maybe even you were convicted in those first 3 chapters. I know I was. So I just want to make it really clear. I am not coming from a place of critical negativity. I love you guys, value what you do at New Song, believe they are vital efforts for us to continue being situated in our community and actually giving back to it, and helping New Song to go on mission in tangible ways. So I really want to affirm your efforts. Where I am coming from is to say, you know what, let's look at our ministries and let's say, what are the things we love that we're doing well, let's keep doing them. But also to say, okay, now that we're over the critical negativity, but we really do want to take the time to examine them, what are some things we would like to see better? Where could I see my ministry in a year from now or in 2 years from now? I'm hoping that the things we learn here at least kind of just provide a seedling, if you will, for growth and for saying, hey, let's do this together and let's see if we can continue to affirm the things in our ministries that are going really well, and then to also see what new directions might come from these discussions. I honestly have no, I guess, hidden motivations. Or I don't have a laundry list for each ministry to say, you need to start doing this. I don't have any of that. This really is an idea sharing and hopefully a wonderful process that through the emails and especially in our last time when we're all together and we get to really tackle what should New Song be doing differently, what should it be doing the same. I'm just really hoping that this is an idea sharing forum. All right, so again, thank you so much for joining it. One other thing I want to say before giving the post on chapters 1 through 3 is to really just talk about Bob Lupton. I have come to know him over the last, I think, 8 months. I don't know him super well or anything, but Chris Neal and I are actually in a Kern Compassion group where about 20 pastors are dealing with this exact issue. And Bob actually joins us on these conference calls. He's really given a lot of his time. He coaches, so individual pastors will bring a case example of something their ministry is going through. They'll bring it to him. He'll coach them. They present it in our group, and he's also there on that conference call. So I really just want to speak to his character. He is a great guy. He loves the church deeply. He believes it is the salt and the light, and he wants to see the church making a difference in the world through compassion efforts that really make a difference, not those that just have good motivations. So I'm a huge fan of Bob Lupton, and I've got to see him in person, so he's not one of those angry riders or something like that. Okay, so I just want to kind of put that plug out. All right, so what we're going to do in this post, real briefly, I'm going to present like 4 main ideas, basically his definition of toxic charity, the problem of focusing on our growth versus the people we actually serve, third, the necessity of justice and mercy working together, and fourth, parity versus charity. Okay, so I'll just kind of these are just my highlights from the first 3 chapters. Hopefully these will resonate with you. Then I'll tell a brief story on how some of my ministries have been affected by his teaching and some that are still hurting, if you will. And then finally, I'll give those questions to you all so that you can email back and you can respond to the ones that you really resonate with. Okay? So here we go. The first thing is just simply to understand his definition of toxic charity. And what I think his definition of toxic charity is a combination of 2 main quotes from the book. So the first was, when we do for those in need what they have the capacity to do for themselves, we disempower them. So that quote's huge for him, right? That's kind of like an essential ingredient. When we do something for those in need, what they have the ability and capacity to do for themselves, what we end up doing is we actually disempower people. All right. The second one, which is similar, but he calls it doing for. So here's the problem. Doing for rather than doing with those in need is the norm. He says this is what most compassion ministries exist of. Doing for instead of doing with. Add to that essential ingredient, add to it the combination of patronizing pity and unintended superiority, and charity becomes toxic. So this is his basic working definition, that most compassion efforts that he sees toxic charity because there's usually this ingredient of doing for instead of doing with, or doing for others what they can actually do for themselves. And then on top of that, we as the givers end up having patronizing pity and unintended superiority, stuff that we didn't even want, or a lot of times we have a hard time even knowing that it's in us. The mixture of those things is toxic charity in his eyes. All right, so hopefully you got that. That came across real loud and clear, but just want to highlight that because that's really big. It's kind of the presupposition of his book. All right. Okay, a second thing I wanted to highlight is the problem of focusing on our growth instead of those we're serving. And I have to say, I totally am guilty of this. I think many times when I think of even this area, right, our compassion efforts at New Song, much of what I think about is, I really want New Songers to be people who care about those who are hurting, in need, broken. I get that, and that's a good thing, right? As a pastor, I should be concerned about that. But what's interesting is I will regularly elevate that higher than, okay, so we're going to do some various outreach. What about those people? What about the needy and the homeless in our community? Do I really care about their lives more than I care about us New Songers becoming more like Jesus and serving in the way that Jesus would like? If I'm honest, I regularly prioritize our growth instead of those that we're serving. I think he's highlighting something that's really convicting for me. So I don't know if you resonated with that, but I wanted to highlight that idea. Do we focus on our growth over those we're serving? Third, he really makes this point about the necessity of justice and ministry being enmeshed together. Don't do one without the other. Justice alone can have this heart-wrenching, kind of this narrow, law-abiding type of thing going on. Mercy, these compassionate efforts where you just respond to someone in crisis, they're wonderful, and yet if they're without looking at the greater systems of injustice, they go dead, or they start to misapply. You actually start to hinder people when you're just thinking mercy. And if you remember from his book, he quoted Micah 6:8. He said, what does the Lord require? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is what the Lord wants. And so I think it's a great case example of saying, yeah, there's a reason why Micah said justice and mercy, because both are needed. It's not one versus the other. It's just simply neither of them get the wholeness of it. We need to marry them together. So I thought that was a really great insight. Finally, the last one is parity versus charity. He believes that charity creates this kind of us versus them, or the up and the downers, right? The givers and the receivers, okay? And he says we need to work towards parity. Parity means there's going to be some mutually reciprocalness to the relationship. So, as one of his examples, he really loves thrift stores more than he talked about his clothing closet, right? And the reason he loves a thrift store is because guess what? The thrift store needs customers to come and buy their materials, right? They're not going to pay the lights. They're not going to pay salary. They're not going to make any money. It's going to be a flop, right? So unless they provide good services and unless they're able to attract customers, they aren't going to make it. Likewise, the customers are looking for a deal. They don't have as much money. They want quality clothes at a reasonable price. And we know if you've been shopping lately, there are many places that is hard to find. And so we see this mutually reciprocal relationship that's going on in parity. And he's saying we've got to move things to parity. All right, so those were my 4 highlights. Hopefully they resonate with you. Now what I'd love to do, just real briefly again, here's a story that's directly affected my ministry. Here's one of my difficulties. I'm helping to coach and send a Cambodia team of 10 people, and they're roughly going to raise $40,000-ish. And he talked about short-term mission trips. And yeah, when I think about if we just gave Agape International Ministry, $40,000. Man, that has got to be better used than just sending a team for 2 weeks. I have to admit that. Now, the only way I can even reconcile it, because otherwise we wouldn't have even moved forward with Cambodia, the only reason is because Don and Bridget, the president themselves, said we really need teams. We value when team comes. They make a lasting impact. So, I mean, there's still a part of me that goes, seriously, I really think the money alone would go further. And I have to swallow that, and it's a hard one to swallow. And yet, I think because of their invitation, I think there's a reason for it. But I have to admit, even as I'm coaching, even as I'm training, helping to train this team, there's an uneasiness in me. So I want to admit that. That's where I'm convicted, and I sit there and go, wow, I don't know. The other place where this has had direct effect, though, is in our interactions with Mexico. And so I just want to briefly tell you some of that timeline. Some of you have been there with me to Mexico. To sum up, for 11 years, we did a lot of financial giving, helped to provide Marco and Letty's home. We've spent significant dollars on their church. We have done many, many things that have involved our going and giving and doing some good stuff while we're there, and then us leaving, and that being the relationship, right? This relationship where money is in the forefront. 2 years ago, right about now, is actually in, I think, late March 2 years ago, we were on one of those trips, just me, Mark Tyler, and Ryan DeLapp. Many of you know them. Mark had a relationship for about 8 years. I only had known them for about 1 year at this time. But we were just talking about stuff, and Letty, Marco's wife, it's hard to convey it the way she did, but she had such pain and anguish when she said, you know what I don't understand about our community is I don't understand how they can think that all the things that we've been given, all the money that's come in, is from those Americans. I know that this is from God. This is God's provision to us. And I can't get out of, I don't understand why they think it's from American giving. And she had this, I mean, that's what's hard to describe, is the pain on her face as she told us this story, or this, and this basically interpretation that the community has of their church. And the way I interpreted that, what brought me so much pain in it, was to know that our giving had helped to cause that. And that essentially, if I had to boil it down, our giving efforts over a long, long period of time had actually disempowered their community, and it made their community believe or interpret them as an Americanized church, and they weren't giving the honor and glory to God. They weren't seeing that that provision ultimately stems from God. So what I really think happened is, in some way, we actually hurt their witness in Mexico. So as she was telling me that story, I knew something had to change. And so I basically, over the last 2 years, have helped to change it. And 1 year ago, so in the fall, in the winter, we did the Mexico giving boxes, and I just said, all right, we're going to do this, but I feel really uneasy with this. So about a year ago, we were going to go last summer, which we did. So I had a student who was totally fluent in Spanish help me have a conversation with them where they were asking for $2,600. We had the church structure, and they needed the electrical and windows. So basically, we didn't want to just yank the rug from under their feet, right? So we said, all right, you've asked for $2,600. We will try to raise $1,300. But I communicated through him to say, you know what? We love this friendship. We love this partnership. But this is going to be New Song's last financial donation. We really don't believe that what you voiced last year is a real problem. And so we need to cut that off. And so they received that seemingly well. I think we've had some difficulties since then in certain ways. I think there are ways they don't understand, and I know this is part of the messiness of it. But so we did raise money for the trip. The other thing we really did was, the 2 summers before that, we had planned the VBS, and they helped us, right? And this doesn't make sense. I mean, imagine Connie having missionaries come host her VBS for us at New Song. No way. This is one of the most important things New Song does in the summer, to reach out to children. Connie has that project, and yeah, she mobilizes this community like no other. 75 to 100 volunteers a year help to make VBS a success. It's awesome. But we would never have somebody else host our VBS, right? So I got the idea, you know what? I'm going to go down. So last February, I went down, I got trained by Connie, And I just said, hey, I'm not an expert on this. Connie's done this for 10 years. Here's what she's learned, and I'm passing it on to you. So I took their youth ministry team. We did that training. I would teach for about an hour, then Marco would have them discuss, kind of do a breakout session. We did that 2 or 3 times. And then I said, hey, at the end of this training, let me just make it really clear. In 3 months, we're planning to be back. You guys have said this is when you want us to come. We're excited. We will not come having planned a single thing for this VBS. Because we know that God has gifted you. We know that you have gifts and talents. You're going to run with this. It's going to be phenomenal. We're going to be here to help. We're happy to run games. We're happy to do whatever you want. But we will come with 0 plans because we want you guys to be empowered to do this thing. So we came that summer. We didn't make it up the full $1,300, but we got about $1,100. Felt good with that last kind of financial gift. VBS was phenomenal. It was way more contextualized, obviously. More children attended. Their youth team was empowered. Like, they were just excited that they pulled off such a big and new thing for them. It was a huge win. I don't know if they plan to do VBS this summer. I hope they would. I think it's effective. I think it's helpful. But ultimately, that's their decision, not ours. Again, we're willing to come this summer if they ask us and desire it. But we really think that that's at least a step in the right direction towards parity. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully I didn't talk your ears off. But that's how I'm trying to wrestle through with some of this stuff. All right, last thing, to the questions. Here's what I'm hoping for you guys to do. You can answer all of these in your email post. You can answer some of them, whatever resonates with you. I'm really just trying to stimulate discussion, so I want you guys to go in the direction you guys desire. But here are 5 questions to wrestle with. Here's the first one. 1, do you agree with Lipton's definition of toxic charity? Why or why not? Do you just generally agree? And that doesn't have to be a super long answer. Do you ultimately agree with him? Second one is, do you have any personal stories where you felt uneasiness in a charity effort? What made you feel uneasy about the effort? So I'm stating it with Cambodia. I'm stating with what I felt in Mexico, and I've seen a lot of growth there. But that uneasiness is what helped to prompt me to do something different. So can you recount any uneasiness, whether it's in your current ministry or in past experiences? Third, do you resonate in any way with his observation that many of us are far more focused upon our growth or our team's growth or our organization's growth over and above the people we serve? Do you resonate with that? Why or why not? Like, maybe talk about that a little bit. Fourth one, chapter 3 introduces 2 direct parallels with our ministry activities. He mentions a pantry ministry on page 34 and a toy store instead of a toy giveaway on page 38 and 39. And I know full well those are things we do here. So when you read these stories, what were some of your personal reactions? Did the stories bring anger, defensiveness, a desire to create and develop different forms of mutual giving or work opportunities? How did you respond to those stories? I'd love to hear that. Honestly, I have no intentions I'm just calling out that, he has some direct parallels to some of the stuff we do. How did you interpret those? What do you think about that? Finally, he ends the 3rd chapter with this advice. Due diligence, right? When he talks to that man, John, he said, I don't have all the answers, but due diligence is a part of it. When you have considered your ministry area, would you say you've done due diligence in thinking through these issues of compassion or the relationships in your ministry? Please consider taking some time this week to do some due diligence thinking. And I know that I'm thinking and praying for you as you do. Rodney, Carrie, Keith, Karen, I'm so thankful you guys are doing this. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. All right, so blessings to you, and I am praying that this would produce some great fruit as we respond together. Thank you.